a Western novel that became no less than a John Wayne movie, adapted again to a new film by no less than the Coen brothers. The tale of justice sought after in the not-so-old West. Jeff Bridges, Haley Steinfeld, Josh Brolin, Matt Damon, 2010, True Grit. Maddie Ross is a 14-year-old girl. Her father has been murdered by a shady character. He made the mistake of hiring Tom Chaney to help him move a team of ponies he bought from the big city to the homestead in Yell County. Having got between a drunken and rowdy poker-playing and whiskeyed-up Tom Chaney preparing to gun a man down over a card game, Mr. Ross has ended up dead. Maddie is 14 years old, and yet, as she describes it, her mother is not very literate, not good at math, and overcome with grief. Her siblings are younger than her. At the age of 14, she comes to the big city to recover her father's body, settle his affairs, and seek out justice. She finds for herself Marshal Rooster Cogburn after drilling the local sheriff over what kind of lawman she should be looking to hire, putting out an extra monetary reward in order to speed things up, because this is a time when there's a lot of outlaws and lawmen are looking for a lot of different people, and your chances, as the sheriff says, are not good of seeing this guy arrested, at least not anytime soon. She finds Rooster Cogburn because he's the guy who is the most ruthless. He's the guy that brings in the most men, but brings in the fewest of them alive, and she is not looking for someone that will risk the bad guy getting away because he's determined to give him a fair shake. She's not looking for the Indian tracker marshal who will be on the job hunting. She wants a guy who is willing to be a cold-blooded killer, and she finds him, and based on the testimony she overhears in court, she knows she found her guy. The incredible story of True Grit. I've watched this movie like 5 times in the last 2 days, having been told by friends to watch it for years. I finally did, and I'm blown away by it. I'm not sure what all to say. Not long after the Coen brothers' production of Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, there was a lot of buzz that they were looking at doing a sequel, or rather a prequel, because Oh Brother, Where Art Thou was based on the Odyssey, the journey returning home after the Trojan War, all of the adventures with the Cyclops, the Sirens, all of that stuff works into that film. And though there never was officially a follow-up that was based on the Iliad, the earlier story, there's a lot of interesting similarities between the Iliad and True Grit. One of those is that we get characters that are pre-Shakespearean. That's to say, while Shakespeare is really the go-to guy for Western civilization, for drama, for comedy, you name it, we still make movies based on his stuff. He represents a mentality and a mindset closer to ours, including the way they looked at romance and romantic relationships. And you go back to the Iliad and the Odyssey, you're dealing with archetypes that are far older and have far less to do with heartfelt emotion and more to do with ruthless conceptions of justice. Even the Helen of Troy story is not really a love story in the original epic telling of it. It is a story about someone being dishonored and his property being taken, and he goes on the warpath for revenge. Very much like True Grit, even though we're sure she is devastated, we never actually see 14-year-old Maddie Ross break down. In fact, she comes across as very much ruthless, intelligent, and in control. She outwits at every turn the men that are around her. She's savvy in business and in law. No explanation given how she got so educated and so witty and sharp of tongue, but she's incredible, and from the beginning, it's about getting justice. And it's not even really revenge, though she is obsessed with this justice being carried out in that county, in that place, so that everybody knows that this is justice for her father's killing, not to see the bandit taken away to Texas or elsewhere and punished for his misdeeds there. It's an obsession with an almost Greek and almost Greco-Roman classical conception of justice. And so likewise, we get the same thing with the male characters. The merchant comes across very much as your classical merchant class guy from classical antiquity who wants to strike a hard bargain, but you can talk circles around him. It is the sophistry of those early centuries. Then we have the two warriors, LaBeef, the Texas Ranger, Confederate war veteran, fought in the Army of Northern Virginia, versus Rooster Cogburn, who fought with Bloody Bill and Captain Quantrill and the Raiders in the border states. Two men that both consider themselves having been patriots for a lost cause. One who has assimilated more into the post-war status quo, happy to be in Texas and be a Texas Ranger. And whereas Rooster Cogburn is not still fighting the battle, he is not a Josie Wales figure that's still fighting for the Confederacy, and yet he clearly is not happy with the outcome and the world that he has to live in. And he takes that out through the drinking, through the gunning down of people that albeit have it coming. His work as a marshal allows him to be as ruthless as he ever could be. These guys are really these sort of archetype ancient warriors, and I could do a whole dissertation on how they are similar to characters like Achilles and Agamemnon and Hector from the epic poem. So whether that is what they had in mind, I don't know for sure, but it really does work, and it's why the film works. We don't get a huge amount of backstory on a lot of people. We learn more about Rooster Cogburn as he's talking about his ex-wives, and we know more about his war activities and the nature of them. And yet, we never get that sort of, the thing that we expect in modernity, the explanation for the darkness, the explanation or excuse for why you became what you are. We presume it had a lot to do with the lost cause of the war, but he never really signifies that. There's no particular trauma. He's not Josie Wales, whose family was butchered by Redlegs. We don't really get an explanation for why are you Rooster Cogburn. We also don't get one for why you are LaBeef, the Texas Ranger, and we never get one for why Maddie Ross is so intelligent, so witty, and so far in advance of her years. Instead, what we get are these characters put together in pursuit of a villain with a common cause, which is sometimes common and sometimes not shared. They part ways, come back together. We get this as an epic going off to war, very much like the Iliad. She has come from a distance to seek justice. She has gathered allies that now go with her on this quest into the Indian Territory to seek justice, and will they find it? One of the true geniuses of True Grit also, like Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, other Coen films, it does an amazing job of capturing the period that they're in. When you watch this film, you might immediately be struck with how odd everybody talks. Everybody sounds weird, and for the most part, not like we expect them. They actually put some research and some thought into this. They captured the manner of speaking, the type of vocabulary that literate people had in the 19th century. And so like our language would sound funny to them, their language sounds funny to us. In fact, their language sounds very highbrow and intellectual, especially when they're talking about Latin and the law. But anybody educated in the law at that time would have done that. Anybody, even a Texas Ranger familiar with that terminology, would be able to do that. And they don't make everybody sound super smart. They do a really good job. Your crafty villain comes across as not all of that intellectual, but he's crafty. And of course, Tom Chaney, who's kind of an idiot or a dimwit, he comes across that way really well. His manner of speaking and everything, you almost get the sense that he has diminished capacity in some form, but maybe not. It might just be that he's so uneducated and not been cared for. And so their manner of speaking immediately strikes one as being like, what in the world is going on here? But it's brilliant. It is period correct. It is place appropriate, and they use it very well. And the writing is genius. The writing of this script, this is just pure, it is pure poetry. The way they speak, the little jabs and insults, the back and forth, and it's one of the most quotable movies, of course, Most of the Coen brothers movies for me are very quotable movies. True Grit is no different in that. Because I comment on popular culture today, I need to bring this up. The film is 2010. It's before the era of woke, but even then, it does not have a great deal of even the more classically liberal nonsense in it. But this is the real genius of the movie. It is based around how intelligent and resilient this 14-year-old girl is. We are given no explanation for how she became this way. But it works for this film. It works because even though we don't get background on how she became this witty and intelligent, we see her being witty and intelligent. Today, when they write young female characters, Haley Steinfeld herself just played one, Kate Bishop, the Kate in the Hawkeye series for Marvel. And this is more clearly than ever, this is the fault of Marvel, and it's certainly not hers. She is a brilliant actress. I had no idea. But when she played 14-year-old Maddie Ross in 2010, she does a brilliant job performing this. So any failure with the later character is completely the writing, the direction, the production. It is not her being talentless. But in case in point, all of the current Mary Sue-based, artificially feminist shows, the movies, everything, just pushing out random people that we will all applaud and affirm because of whatever they identify as, and are given nothing. They're not given a background story. They're not given any achievements to achieve. And we never actually see them do anything awesome either. But we hear over and over again how awesome they are. They surround them with casts of men and women that tell them, you make me better. You're so awesome. Oh my God, you're amazing, for absolutely no reason. In True Grit, Maddie Ross is awesome. We don't know why. We don't know her background or how she got this way, but she totally kicks butt. She comes in and she owns the situation despite fear. And you can see there's some trepidation with her, but she stands up for her family, for her father, for justice, for the family business. She goes toe to toe with a merchant and kicks his butt more than once. He's intimidated by her because she knows her shit. However she learned it, she knows it, and we watch her use it. And so we as the audience sit there and go, wow, she just kicked his butt. We don't need a whole cast of people clapping and telling her on the screen that she's awesome and not have her doing anything awesome. Second part of this is it's realistic to her situation. Yeah, it's kind of feminist in the sense that she's a 14-year-old girl that's owning this situation. And yet, even in classical myth, sometimes it's the daughter that avenges the father. So this is not a big thing. But the way she does it shows wisdom. Real wisdom. Wisdom is in knowing what you don't know, or knowing that you know nothing, as Plato said. Knowing what you're not good at. She does not get out her dad's gun at the hotel and decide to ride into Indian territory and find this guy herself. She figures out how to get the ponies returned, get the money for that, get the money for this, and put up a reward and hire a marshal. She's smart enough to know that she, at 14, a girl, is not going to ride into unknown territory with a gun she can barely pick up and find the bad guy. If this were written today, especially by Disney, Marvel, or some idiotic thing, she would have ridden off into the desert, miraculously knowing how to ride. She'd have gunned him down, and without any explanation for how she knew how to do that, the story would just be, what's going on here? There'd be no other characters. There'd be no other dynamic. If there were other characters, she'd be leading them around by the hand and telling them what to do. And then you're like, why are they there? But this film is not that way. It is a realistic story that, though we don't know why Maddie is so clever, it's realistic that her at that time being that clever still is smart enough to know that she needs to hire a big guy with a gun who knows the area. And she's smart enough, too, to know that she's not going to just hand over her money and turn him loose on the job. She's determined to go with. But despite her determination to do crazy stuff like ride out after the bad guy, she knows she needs somebody. to go with her and to stick up for her. And she knows she wants the ruthless guy who will shoot and take no prisoners because he's a little bit quick on the trigger finger. I can't say enough good stuff about this movie, the way that it does this, that without a whole huge story arc, there's not that sort of Shakespearean redemption arc. There's not that whole, it's more like the generic warrior's journey. It's a lot more like the classical mythology. There's somebody in need of swift justice. We get together, we characters with these various traits, and we bring them to swift justice. And how we get there and enjoying that justice is the payoff for the story. And that's what True Grit is. And yet along the way, there's so many good jokes, there's fun dialogue, there's insults, there's cool stuff that happens. It's all dressed up in this. It is visually and dialectically just poetry. It's a beautiful, fabulous, amazing film. So glad I finally watched it. Lord only knows how many more times I will watch it. It's definitely going into one of that top 10 category of movies that whenever there's nothing else on, I put one of them on and just keep watching it because it's that good. True Grit, 2010.